A Lord of Change, also called a Supreme Mutator, or one of Tzeentch's eyes, is an insidious greater demon of the Chaos God of Change and Sorcery. These greater demons appear as towering beings with gangling limbs and a deceptively delicate look. Their long, spiny bodies are topped by a savage, cruel avian head resting on a long, crooked neck. Their hunched shoulders are often draped with what looks like robes from a high priest or a court wizard from ages long past. Their bent bird-like legs are scaly and end in vicious talons. Their lank arms terminate in broad clawed hands. Great feathered wings sprout from their shoulder blades, glittering and glistening with 1,000 impossible colors. The bones of a Lord of Change are hollow, and despite their enormous size, they barely seem capable of supporting their own weight, often leaning up against immense staffs, etched with innumerable eldritch signs and sigils. Most Lords of Change carry these long ceremonial staffs, which they use to channel their considerable psychic power. These powerful demonic servants of Tzeentch carry themselves with a regal grace, though when driven to action, their savagery is remarkable. All Lords of Change are fearsome fighters, serpent-quick with skin like iron. They are also lore masters and possess a thorough knowledge of the great feints and fighting techniques of the galaxy. Defense with a Lord of Change is to invite one's own ruin. Many overzealot warriors have been felled by their vicious claws, cruel curved beaks, and terrible reaping staves, disemboweled before they can even lift their blade. These combination of features are as bewildering as they are terrifying, and they are ever-changing, with multi-hued forms that defy mortal reason or logic. However, its most haunting feature are its eyes. Within their infinite depths lies a paradoxical wisdom of Tzeentch, and none can withstand the substantial scrutiny of the Lord of Change's gaze without losing their sanity. It is said that when a Lord of Change looks upon a man, the man's soul is open like a book, revealing his hopes and dreams, as well as the truth of his ultimate failures or successes. Lords of Change are the embodiment of Tzeentch's delight in sorcery, deception, and knowledge. They are the chief agents of the Architect of Fate, and the most powerful of his demonic minions. Despite possessing a small fragment of the immeasurable wisdom of their masters, even they are unwitting pawns to Tzeentch's great and unfathomable plans, a plot of limitless complexity that will come to fruition at the end of time. A greater demon of Tzeentch is driven by the need to redirect the predictable course of history itself, and to see it upon a new, unexpected path. Because of this, a Lord of Change revels in dashing the hopes of the ambitious upon the ground, even while raising penniless nobodies to the pinnacle of power. A Lord of Change is blessed with a multi-layered cunning and blazing intelligence, as well as a deep understanding of the casualty that drives the galaxy in its well-worn rut. There is nothing a Lord of Change despises more than the entrapping comfort of stability and familiarity, and nothing that will please one more than to see the world broken and made anew. A greater demon of Tzeentch delights in bringing order to ruin, so that all may be reshaped and directed to a new path before that too is changed. His minions move throughout real space, undertaking whatever task he has set for them. The killing of a minor mortal, a whisper in a commander's ear, the stealing of a worthless artifact, and 1,000 other seemingly unrelated occurrences that are mistaken for happenstance. Yet each falls into the greater demon's own devious plan, and furthers his labyrinthian schemes. Lords of Change tend to work behind the scenes, pulling puppet strings from the shadows. So subtle are these manipulations, and so skilled, that often the playthings of the Lord of Change remain unaware that they are in the thralls of a deadly demon. Secret chaos cults, heresies, revolutionaries, and even imperial planetary governors have all fallen under the thrall of a Lord of Change at one point or another. Even Tzeentch's bitter foes can be manipulated into fulfilling the great deceiver's end. Under his most powerful demon's careful guidance, brothers can turn against brothers, friend against friend, and even the most zealot of inquisitors can stumble from the path of righteousness. To confront a Lord of Change is to wander through a mist of lies, ever unsure of one's own actions, one false step away from complete corruption. In the rare instance that a Lord of Change is beset, its schemes sundered, and its plans laid to ruin, it will fight like a cornered animal, drawing upon its incredible sorcerous powers to fell its foe directly where deceit and deception have failed. Lords of Change are the greatest chaos sorcerers in the galaxy, and their mastery of magic is without peer. The mightiest psychic powers and spells employed by feeble human psychers and sorcerers are the idle cantrips of a Lord of Change. For a greater demon of Tzeentch is a creature of undiluted warp energy, and the mortal world quakes at its touch. With the merest flick of an elegant claw, bodies mutate and wither, buildings twist and melt, and beings of madness and horror spring forth from running rivers of flesh. Nothing that is done cannot be undone. Nothing that is made cannot be unmade. To prevail against the Lord of Change, one's faith and convictions must be firmer than the foundation of the stars. The Emperor protects, but one's faith must be ironclad in the face of such a horror. The constant appraisal of the galaxy and the interference in its process is not always so subtle. Change can also be sudden and violent, and the Lord of Change will readily wage war to further his own unknown aims. Though these greater demons prefer to remain uncommitted in battle, it is not through lack of courage or ferociousness, but because they wish to direct its forces and control the ebb and flow of the fighting. Few have ever been able to best the Lord of Change, for their patron god is the master of destiny itself, and his greatest servants possess a portion of this power. These Lords of Change have plagued the Imperium for millennia. Deep in the vaults of the Tricorn's librarium lies ancient, dusty tomes that chronicle the Inquisition's initial forays into the newly discovered region of space that would eventually be known as the Calixis Sector. Amongst these ancient records, there is one tome that speaks of the Inquisition's battles against the greater demon known as Marbas, a deceptible servant of Tzeentch. For whatever reason, this Lord of Change plotted against the Imperial Angevin Crusade, which brought the Calix Expanse into the Emperor's light, inspiring heathen worlds encountered by the Imperial forces to resist the interlopers. He also incited pacified worlds to rise up in rebellion across the sector, igniting insurrections on a massive scale and causing unheard-of levels of destruction. The Inquisition was hard-pressed on nearly a dozen worlds as they attempted to stamp out the heretical cults and agents of Marbas. They eventually tracked the greater demon to the hive world of Malify, where the foul creature was slain through the valiant sacrifice of the demon hunter, Zalin, as she rammed her gun cutter into a hive spire that the demon occupied. In the wake of the devastation, the demon hunter's surviving followers evoked the rites of banishment, exiling the Lord of Change to the warp for 1,000 Terran years and a day. Over the next millennia, the Inquisition had largely forgotten its past with this vile demon, its attention drifting to more important matters of present day. However, the same cannot be said of Marbas, for during its centuries of exile, the demon has nursed a great grudge against those it deemed responsible for his lamented fate. The creature's banishment has now come to an end. Marbas now prepares to bathe the entire Calixis sector in the blood of innocents and fire once more. Another Lord of Change that is plotting against the Imperium is Shim Drilax Khazar, a commander of the Pyroclastic Conclave, a demonic legion in service of Tzeentch. The Pyroclastic Conclave is a so-called conflagration legion, a legion dedicated to fiery destruction and centered around formations of flamers of Tzeentch, capable of wielding the most powerful of warp flames. It is one of the many demon legions deployed to the Styges sector by the Architect of Fate in the aftermath of the Great Rift's birth, and played a critical role in the siege of the world of Mordian. Gara'thulo is one of the greater demons of Tzeentch that has appeared in the material realm and taken on many names. He has been the Prince of 1,000 Faces, the Forger of Hells, the Whisperer in the Darkness, the God of the Last Hunt, and the 77th Mask. Countless atrocities have been committed in his name. He learns more, and thus becomes more powerful. A demon has no real date of birth, for its essence comes from the warp. Yet Gara'thulo was once young, and in his youth he showed considerable interest in the material realm, and in particular in the species known as man. Like many of the greater demons of the ruinous powers, he craved the new experiences and sensations of the Imperium, crossing the veil whenever he found a mind of sufficient psychic power to harbor him. Escaping the warp, he reveled in the feelings of having a physical body, from the weight of his own muscles and bones to the dullness of possessing only 5 senses. The material world offered him countless new sensations and experiences. Gara'thulo used his physical body to interact with mankind, for he had emerged in the troubled time known as the Age of Strife. His words and stories were perceived as the insane gibbering of the mentally ill amongst the petty, narrow-minded human beings he encountered. The aura of power surrounding him was such that everyone who laid eyes upon him instantly knew that he was not human. Yet in the tumultuous times of war and bloodshed that was the Age of Strife, even a madman like this demon could become a king. It is the firm belief of the Inquisition that Gara'thulo spent almost the entirety of the Age of Strife under various human identities. He was the brutal warlord who condemned whole worlds to burn just to satisfy his ego. He was a hero whose name was venerated by millions. He was both the woman who bathed every morning in the sea of the blood of her foes, and the pirate king who united a dozen star systems only to let them fight each other and see which would prevail. Gara'thulo watched an entire empire in the void rise and fall as cities were erected and tore down. As a species, mankind ultimately lost the ability to travel the stars, fracturing into 1,000 different worlds, stellar empires and kingdoms, all at war with each other, all to please this demon. In countless disguises and under many different names, Gara'thulo gathered knowledge and grew ever more powerful. This is when he became known as the Prince of 1,000 Faces. Many times he knew defeat and even pain when his host's physical body was killed. The Age of Strife lasted longer than any human could comprehend, longer even than the history could properly record. Every life Gara'thulo lived fed his lust and his pursuit of knowledge that was the true mark of every servant of Tzeentch. But after centuries of bloodshed, the truth dawned upon the demon. He was a mere child, and the Age of Strife was his playground. For every victory he achieved, he had also known defeat. For each empire that rose to power, another fell in anarchy. Ultimately, mankind had one inherent flaw. It was weak. However powerful, mankind could not endure, for the slow passage of time could see it fail time and time again, for the only eternal power, that of the gods, rested within the warp. Only the Chaos Gods were truly eternal, and mankind could not hope to emulate them. When Gara'thulo realized this fundamental truth, he began to despise the species he had toyed with for so long. He still occasionally ventured into the material realm to cause wanton panic and havoc, but it was an action devoid of sense, only meant to distract him from his state of boredom. There was no knowledge to be found there, no secrets to learn, for mankind was but a crude and ignorant animal that could not gain true, meaningful power, until one man changed all of this. On distant Terra, the cradle of mankind, a visionary warlord had risen to power and seized control of the homeworld, a stranger calling himself the Emperor. The Emperor had something special. He had a vision called the Great Crusade. Whether he knew it or not, whether he wanted it or refused the very notion of it, the Emperor had declared every human being a citizen of the newly founded Imperium of mankind. Through violence and peaceful negotiations, the Emperor strove to reunite the scattered species and establish mankind as the dominant race of the galaxy, a people that could rival the might of the Eldar of old. Such raw ambition piqued the interest of the demon, but the Prince of 1,000 Faces refrained from interfering. For centuries, the Great Crusade conquered mankind's scattered domains, unifying them into the Imperium. For the first time in history, mankind secured lasting power. The Imperium even surviving the Great War of the Horus Heresy, when the Emperor's favorite general, Horus the War Master, guided by blessed chaos, turned his back on his father's plans and declared war upon him. The Imperium even survived the loss of its founder and ruler, pushing back the forces that threatened it time and time again, vanquishing its many foes, surviving both civil wars and alien invasions. And suddenly the galaxy became interesting again. Gara'thulo had found a new purpose, to ensure that the mighty Imperium, as all empires before it, would fall. As one of the most powerful beings of its kind, Gara'thulo is able to exist simultaneously both within the physical realm and the warp. So while his physical body roams the galaxy, Gara'thulo's essence was able to heed his master's call when the Changer of Ways, the Chaos God Tzeentch, called for a conclave of his most devoted servants on the world of Thalos. These events roughly took place in the 38th millennium, some 2,000 standard years before the Inquisitor Ligeia and the Justicar Alaric would discover the demon's taint upon the trail of Saint Evisur. Historical data shows a notable increase in civil unrest, mass hysteria, and demonic possession at this time, without humanity's protectors ever connecting the two events. As discovered by Ligeia, it was the gathered might of the Conclave of Thalos that wreaked havoc on humanity's collective psyche. Within the warp, the power of Tzeentch had grown strong enough to eclipse the other Chaos gods, and like the toll of a gigantic bell, Tzeentch's call gathered his followers to the world of Thalos, a planet deep within the Imperium that embodied the concept of change. Every solar hour, Thalos' continents rearranged themselves. Great mountains suddenly spilled forth from seas of nitrogen before fading away or turning into thick forests or plains of multicolored grass. The armies of the Changer of Ways assembled there, settling old scores or creating new rivalries, as one by one the greater demons that were princes of their kind arrived. As his generals competed, Tzeentch bestowed gifts upon his lords of change, ignoring the most abled and rewarding the least gifted with boons that in centuries would be their downfall. At the same time, the lesser demons, screamers, and horrors fled before the might of those ancient beings, such as Boker the Wildsman, Maleficio of the Burning Hands, and Themyscryon the Star Dragon. Last to arrive was Old Master Darkeye and Gara'thulo himself, as they hid amongst mankind and tormented it invisibly. With their cohort of demons gathered around them, those favored few awaited the revelation their god would see fit to grant them. When Tzeentch finally spoke, Thalos was devastated. The Chaos God stripped the planet of its crush and mantle, reducing it to the shoal of drifting continents revolving around a single fiery core like a miniature star system. The weakness of the remaining demons were thrown off, hurled across the warp until only the strongest remained. To this inner circle, Tzeentch spoke of impossible things, of things that were and things yet to come, of the secrets that held together reality and the shifting destinies of entire species yet to be found or revealed. To the lesser of their numbers, those of a more aggressive nature, these concepts communicated little more than dissolution and hatred, and they reveled in these visions. In contrast, the mightiest generals of the Lord of Change glimpsed visions of possible futures they were to enact or to avoid, plots they would enact both within the warp and the material realm. Some of the weaker, greater demons were even destroyed by the visions, unable to fully embrace or comprehend the divination of the Changer of Ways. But a quite different fate awaited Gara'thulo. The Prince of 1,000 Faces fully immersed himself in Tzeentch's message, bathing in the revelations that streamed forth from the God of Change in a raging torrent of white fire and pure information. Gara'thulo gorged himself on his patron's knowledge, as the other demons looked in awe, hatred, and jealousy. Many hoped that the demon would be destroyed, but Tzeentch had other plans for his favored son. For days and days, even measured in a strange timescape of the warp, Gara'thulo received a revelation of Tzeentch. The strain, even in his inhuman mind, was so powerful that in the physical realm his body shuddered. When finally his communion ended, 1,000 new faces opened their eyes and cast their gaze upon the warp and beyond. For now Gara'thulo was ready to enact the will of Tzeentch. Even before heeding Tzeentch's call to gather at Thalos, Gara'thulo had claimed a world for himself, the uninhabited planet of Coron IX, deep within the unexplored region of the halo zone of the Segmentum Obscurus, a region of space where even the light of the mighty Astronomicon shone but very dimly. For long Terran centuries, Gara'thulo had hid there, fully corrupting the world. In the wake of the revelation he received at Thalos, Gara'thulo's physical body shuddered and emitted a psychic shriek that killed every living creature on the planet. The scream traveled for several light years, reaching several inhabited star systems and worlds, revealing Gara'thulo's existence to mankind. Knowing that eventually humanity would seek to destroy him, the Prince of 1,000 Faces gathered his mortal and demonic followers, readying himself for when humanity's warriors would come, and come they did. It had taken the Ordo Malleus of the Inquisition an entire standard century of intense investigation before they tracked Gara'thulo to Coron IX, a world Gara'thulo had thoroughly made his own. The cultists and demagogues that had been venerating one of the many incarnations of Gara'thulo had gathered on Coron IX to reap the reward of their devotion, eternal life. Gara'thulo held true to his promise, albeit not in the form his followers intended. All across Coron IX, the Prince of 1,000 Faces erected countless tortured racks, upon which still living followers were crucified. Screaming but alive, these cultists were the literal lifeblood of the planet, their blood mingling with the wood of their racks and seeping into the earth, their perpetual screams of agony thinning the veil so that Gara'thulo's demonic armies could cross into the material universe. The corrupting energies of the warp steadily fused the cultists and their surroundings together, the rows upon rows of tortured racks and crucified bodies becoming a living forest that grew with each season, turning their limbs into fleshy branches and towering canopies that wailed in agony with an all-too-human voice, all to please the Prince of 1,000 Faces. When the Valor Santornum and the Vengeful, two strike cruisers belonging to the Grey Knights chapter of the Adeptus Astartes, arrived in system, the first thing they noticed was the screaming, the agonizing cries of the planet's tortured souls. They could be heard even in orbit around the dreaded world, their collective pain gnawing at their attackers' resolve, or it would have, had their attackers not been tempered by cries far worse than those of mere humans. In name, the Valor Santornum and the Vengeful were under the command of Lord Inquisitor Laconius of the Ordo Malleus, but in truth, operational authority resided with the Grand Master Maldeus of the Grey Knights. The two strike cruisers carried an impressive force, over 250 Grey Knights, led by a triumvirate of Grand Masters of their order, Mandulus, Galen, and Malquiant. It was the best and most powerful strike force the Ordo Malleus could muster, and yet despite the reputation and experience of every one of these Grand Masters, its success was far from certain. The arrival of his opponents was the sign that the demon had waited for to call his armies. The planet's screams of agony rose in pitch, fueled by fear, as everywhere on the planet the earth bursted into great cracks, spilling forth demonic legions bound to Gara'thulo. Horrors and flamers almost immediately turned to further torturing Gara'thulo's mortal followers, while screamers took to the air and nestled in the crucified forest canopy. Amongst the throng of demon flesh that covered the earth from horizon to horizon, the greater demons marshaled their forces, trampling the crucified under their feet. Soon the planet's surface was teeming like an ocean, a planet covered in demon flesh, ready to repel the Grey Knight's attack, a trap to ensnare and crush them. Gara'thulo was already on the planet, his court having gathered on site of an ancient burial ground where the planet's former inhabitants used to bury their dead. This was the Grey Knight's ultimate target. Given the tumultuous state of the warp, a teleport assault would be deemed too dangerous, and so the Grey Knights took to their drop pods to deliver them to the battlefield. Each Grand Master would lead their own company of men and fight their way through to Gara'thulo in order to banish the Prince of 1,000 Faces. Ideally, the three formations would link before facing the demon, but this plan soon proved unattainable. Grand Master Ganelon and his 100-strong company landed well off the target mark, finding themselves surrounded at the heart of a demonic legion with no hope to reach the objective. Fighting wave after wave of demons, the Grey Knights knew they were doomed, but would continue to fight. Their defiance would ease the pressure on their brothers and let them finish the mission. As the Lord of Change gathered around them, Grandmaster Galeon himself intoned the sacred verse of the prayer of purification, readying his soul for his last journey. Grandmaster Malquiant led an impressive spearhead of more than 70 Grey Knights against the horde, his fearsome lightning claws reaping a bloody toll on the enemy. Through courage and single-minded focus, the spearhead concentrated much of the horde's attention, but the press of bodies and the broken ground made it nearly impossible for them to reach their target. The killing blow would have to be delivered by Grandmaster Mandulus and his men, those who had landed closest to the burrow where Gara'thulo resided. Mandulus' detachment comprised of a number of purgation squads, whose firepower enabled Mandulus and his Terminator squad Martel to reach the burrow. Having delivered the chosen warriors to their objective, the remaining squad concentrated their fire to hold back the demonic legion rushing to their master's aid. Grandmaster Mandulus penetrated the enemy headquarters. The corruption there was so vile that even the earth spewed forth the stone coffins of the ancient dead, coming back to unlife in a last effort to escape the terrible corruption unleashed by the Prince of 1,000 Faces. Under the great trees formed by Gara'thulo's most eminent cult leaders, Gara'thulo's personal guard awaited the Grey Knights, a dozen greater demons of Tzeentch, Lords of Change. Disciplined bolter fire was answered by multicolored lightning bolts before quickly devolving into hand-to-hand combat. The lesser armored Grey Knights fared ill, cleaved in two by great talons or wicked and strange-looking swords of the greater demons. But Mandalus, Martel, and his Terminators endured. Gigantic, glowing hands emerged from the ground, grabbing the Grey Knight's legs, sometimes even pulling down mighty Terminators. But despite their best efforts, these demons could not stop Mandalus and Martel from reaching the Prince of 1,000 Faces. The true course of this battle is unknown, but the outcome was never in doubt. Through his sacrifice, Grandmaster Mandalus ensured that Gara'thulo was banished from real space. For 10,000 standard years, the Grey Knights and the Ordo Malleus commemorated their victory upon the forces of Tzeentch, before realizing they had only been manipulated. Their celebrated victory had actually played right into the hands of Gara'thulo. Millennia before Mandalus and his brethren had taken the fight to the planet, Gara'thulo had already begun to enact his master plan, discreetly planting the seeds of his eventual return. The events leading up to the assault of Coron IX and even his own banishment had been mere distractions, a ploy to lead the Imperium to believe he was gone. As the Inquisition would only discover in the late 41st millennium, Gara'thulo's taint had befallen almost the entirety of the Trail of St. Evesir, a loose collection of planets on the western edge of the Segmentum Solar. The origin of the taint was identified to have been the feudal world of Sophano Secundus, a planet colonized in the wake of the Great Crusade, when the Emperor was already worshipped as a god. In the wake of the Emperor's entombment into the Golden Throne, a hence unknown figure, missionary Crucian of the Missionaria Galaxia, settled on Sophano Secundus and began to preach the teachings of the Lectitio Divinatus, Lorgar's ancient tome, or at least this was what the Administratum was led to believe. In truth, Crucian was an ancient of Gara'thulo, a powerful psyker who over the following millennia fully corrupted the planet's society. With the cunning so typical of the followers of Tzeentch, Crucian changed his identity every few standard decades as to not alert the Inquisition as to his unnatural longevity, a tactic that proved so effective that Crucian's true identity would only be discovered by the investigation of Inquisitor Ligeia in the 41st millennium. As he had done on the planet of Sophano Secundus, Gara'thulo chose to infiltrate and corrupt imperial agencies, using the inner workings of the Imperium to spread his cult and the worship of Tzeentch. With Sophano Secundus firmly under his control, Crucian chose one of his followers to serve as a simple administratum clerk on the neighboring world of Solshan 19, an agri-world that soon became the target of an orc invasion. The orcs slaughtered the planet's population, but Gara'thulo's pawn, undoubtedly protected by his Dark Master, was miraculously spared. The clerk's name was Coron IX, and within a few short standard years, he became the lauded St. Evesir, from which the Trail of St. Evesir would eventually derive its name. Refusing to be reassigned to another post, Coron Evesir became a popular figure for the hard-working and oppressed masses of the Imperium, for he had been a nobody, elevated to the rank of true greatness. Although never officially canonized by the Adeptus Ministorum as an imperial saint, Evesir soon was referred to as Saint Evesir, his status seemingly confirmed by the many miracles he accomplished during his travels across the region. On the world of Traptos, a savage plague was decimating the population of the hive cities, and Saint Evesir spent 6 solar months in the quarantine zone, comforting the dying without contracting the disease. On the forge world of Magnos Omicron, Saint Evesir convinced the mutant slave caste that had taken up arms against the Mechanicus overlords to lay down their weapons and willingly return to work. Within a standard year, Evesir's fame led countless masses of believers to flock to him. Entire worlds petitioned the living saint to come to them and bless their cities and populations in exchange for erecting chapels, churches, monuments, museums, and cathedrals in his honor. Continent-spanning celebrations and masses were held in his honor, as in the wake of St. Eviser's pilgrimage, the very essence of the warp was made calm, and trade and travel brought prosperity to the trail of St. Eviser. When the unproclaimed saint eventually died, the Adeptus Ministorum buried him on the hive-world of Volcanus Ultor, allowing time to slowly erode the memory of the saint that was not. Gara'thulo had successfully manufactured his own imperial saint, a powerful relic he could corrupt and thus re-enter the material realm. Worse yet, on every world visited by St. Eviser, hidden chaos cults began to blossom, until Gara'thulo's influence had spread to each and every world on the trail, and even into the imperial adepta, such as the Adeptus Administratum, and even the Inquisition itself. As the 13th Black Crusade drew near, Gara'thulo buried his clutches deep within one of the Imperium's finest, Inquisitor Gothlic Rensar Velinov of the Ordo Malleus, the very agency charged with tracking and banishing the demonic servants of chaos. Valinov's corruption served two purposes. First, to steal an original edition of the famed Codicium Aeternum, the Ordo Malleus's repository of knowledge concerning the true names of those greater demons encountered by the Grey Knights and the Inquisition, and second, to convince the Grey Knights to deliver the final relic needed for Gara'thulo's rebirth, the weapon that had slain him on Coron IX, the Sword of Mandalus. Having successfully manipulated the Imperium to aid him in his rebirth, Gara'thulo showed his hand, letting the trail of Eviser descend into anarchy, as to better promote the Grey Knights and the Inquisition's intervention. Through a carefully orchestrated escalation of conflict, Gara'thulo ensured that the Grey Knights would play the role he had chosen them to play, to deliver the final element that would allow him to return to real space. As Gara'thulo's time of rebirth grew imminent, his puppet, Valinov, used the secrecy the Grey Knights shrouded themselves in to turn Volcanus Ultor's loyal Imperial defenders against those who sought to prevent the Prince's return. The Imperial Navy, the Imperial Guard, and even the Adeptus Sororitas were set against the approaching Grey Knights, forcing the members of the chapter, under the command of Justicar Alaric, to slay countless valiant Imperial soldiers in order to reach St. Eviser's grave. The resulting fraternal bloodshed further added to the potency of the chaotic ritual. In the end, Gara'thulo's millennia-long scheme bore its fruit, as the Sword of Mandalus struck down the reanimated corpse of St. Eviser. The barrier between the Materium and the Immaterium was sufficiently weakened to allow Gara'thulo's return. St. Eviser disintegrated into a gigantic column of ever-mutating flesh, a towering monstrosity that surpassed even the mighty spires of Hive Superior in height. The column of flesh bore thousands and thousands of shrieking faces, giving credit to Gara'thulo's surname as the Prince of 1,000 Faces. Gara'thulo had won. Despite their best efforts and their great sacrifices, the Grey Knights had not been able to prevent Gara'thulo's rebirth onto the material plane. Yet in the very moment of his great triumph, the demon was also brought low. Confident that his trap and the knowledge of his plans would drive any mortal insane, Gara'thulo had thought he had disposed of Inquisitor Legaia, turning his fellow Inquisitors and the Grey Knights she had fought alongside against her. But Gara'thulo had failed to consider Legaia's own gift as an Infocite. Infokites are incredibly rare breeds of psychers, especially in the extraction of information and the divination of meaning. Through a mere touch, these individuals can glean the significance of a text, read entire books and data slates in a matter of solar minutes, and almost instantly break the most complex ciphers and codes. Where other demons deal with countless lies, the source of Gara'thulo's power is information and truth. And even as the Inquisitor Legaia was corrupted by the very knowledge she sought, she had extracted the most precious knowledge of all, Gara'thulo's true name. When Gara'thulo was at his weakest, just after the conclusion of the final ride, while his physical body had not yet fully materialized, Justicar Alaric recited the syllables of Gara'thulo's true name, weakening the demon so that the mass bombardment of Imperial defenders might slay Gara'thulo's material form. Brought low, Gara'thulo was sent reeling back into the warp, his desire to destroy the Imperium from within thwarted once more, at least for now. In the wake of his second banishment, Gara'thulo's true name was entered into the second tome of the Codicium Aeternum, giving future generations of Inquisitors and Grey Knights a considerable advantage should Gara'thulo ever trouble the Imperium again. Although a reading of the Emperor's Tarot indicates that Gara'thulo might not return to the material realm for another millennia, and the power of his many cults along the trail of St. Evisser had been broken, no one knew for sure where Gara'thulo might strike next, or how. But thanks for listening, guys, and I'll talk to you tomorrow. This is Gersh1 with One Mind Syndicate signing out.